So I recently saw a Ducky 3D tutorial where he was shrinking UV islands so he can make these flickering light effects per face and stuff like this, and I thought it was cool, but also I thought that I could approach this with a different method. So this tutorial is going to show you a different way of doing something similar, but it's a bit different, so let me show you a couple examples of what you can make, and then let's make it. Okay, cool, you saw the demo files. Are you hyped? You should be. So this is gonna let you animate individual faces, or you can do groups of faces and stuff like this. And the method I'm using, I'm not gonna say it's my method because I'm sure people have found it before. It only requires a couple nodes, and it's gonna rely on this random per island thing that nobody ever uses. So let's talk about how this works, and it will be a quick little video that you can use on any of your projects. Okay. So here I have Blender open. What version you use isn't too important. What is important is you got to be using cycles. Random per island, as for now at least, only seems to calculate if you're in cycles. If you're in Eevee, you're on the electric chair. It's not good. It's not going to work. So make sure you're in cycles. Okay. Next thing, we're going to go to the shading workspace, and by the way, this is going to be a material-based effect, so you can do this on any mesh, and then you can just swap it out, apply the material, whatever. I'm going to do it on Suzanne. We're just going to make a material. We don't care about all this too much. What we do care about is adding in a geometry node and looking at this random per island, which again, you need to be in cycles to view it. So you can see currently what it does is it takes our Suzanne, makes it cursed. You can see it has one value between 0 and 1. So when we see random per island, it means a number between 0 and 1 that's uniformly distributed random, right? We have this color for the thing and two different colors for the eyes, and you're wondering why is it doing that? Well, if we go to the UV unwrap of this mesh, you can see exactly it's been separated into these islands. You have the eyes, the face, and I guess the ears should also potentially be a slightly different color. But you can see it's taking these islands, these UV islands, and giving them random values. What we want to do is make everything a UV island, every single face. What Ducky 3D did at this point is he did an unwrap and shrunk every face to it. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is you go to modifiers, this is easier, and you just add in an edge split modifier, which you can see already creates new islands, new groups, whatever. What edge split does is it looks at some threshold, an angle number, whatever, and it says if this angle is surpassed, like if we have an angle that is sharper than 30 degrees, I think that's what it means. If you have an angle that's sharper than 30 degrees, separate the edge, make it its own island, whatever, which will result in more islands. Additionally, if you take this number and decrease it, you can see we're going to get more and more and more islands until when it's at 0. Every single face, in theory, should have a different kind of look to it, assuming that they're not coplanar two faces, which they might be. But generally, even if there's a 0.5 degree difference, you're going to be fine. So again, edge split is just making a bunch of UV islands that random per island then randomizes. Okay, fine, but what can you do with this? Well, now that we have this information in the material editor, we could do anything we'd normally do with material. So for example, I'm going to use a greater than node, set this to 0, and you can see as we increase this, it's going to go across the whole mesh, or you can go backwards. Start black, and then go to white. By the way, am I using GPU? I believe I am, yeah. And this is just a way to do the material builder effect, or not the material builder, this build modifier effect. You could do it now in the shader editor if you use this as an alpha, like this, and then view the BSDF. So when we set it to 0, everything's going to be there, and as we increase this to 1, it disappears. So this is how you can make a build a thing. Additionally, I also showed how to make glowing lights. So at this point, you just have this input that you could just put wherever you want. So I'm just going to connect it, in this case, to the emission strength, make the emission a red, I guess. Let's view it. So it's just going to have the BSDF, but in some areas, dictated by this, right, it's going to be having some additional glow. Okay, fine. We could do even better than this. Because this is now in material, we could actually animate this thing. And you're thinking, how do we animate it? Good question. Well, we have this random input. Here we go. We have this random input. All we need to do is have it keep generating new things. So we don't just want one random per island. We want it to keep generating things every single frame. Then we filter it and do the emission. Well, how do we do that? Simple solution. We're going to do math. So I'm just taking my islands. I'm going to be adding a number, and then I'll explain this in a second. I'm going to be taking a fraction. So make sure you have both addition and fraction. Let's view it. And as we increase the addition value, you can see now it's going to be generating random things every single frame. Well, why does this work? When you have random per island, it gives numbers between 0 and 1. You then add something. Some of those are then going to be greater than 1 because you have numbers that are between 0 and 1. You add. Some of them are going to be pushed up. Assuming that some of them are bigger than 1, we then take fraction, which will take it back down to the 0 to 1 range. So fraction just says 2.345. Take away the 2, we just want 0.345. It keeps everything after the decimal. So this is basically like a remapping, if you want to think about it that way. But in essence, the number we're adding is going to be the seed value. And you can have a smooth transition here. It's not a sharp. Unless you wanted to also filter it through a greater than, which we could if you filter it through a greater than. Now it's a sharp transition. And we can control how many faces should be lit up. So the closer this is to 1, the less white faces we're going to have. The closer it is to 0, the less black faces we're going to have. Black faces. Yeah, probably shouldn't say that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 0.5. So half of them are going to be above, half of them are going to be below on average. And for this, instead of like putting in keyframes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in hash. That's a hashtag for you guys. Frame, this is basically a driver. And what it does is, if you haven't seen hash frame before, is it takes the frame number, we're on frame 1, and puts it as the value. So frame 2, I'm just going down a frame 2, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, okay? And you can see that, I mean, not what you'd want to see. You can see this isn't updating, and if you think about the math of it, it makes sense, right? We're adding exactly 1, and then we're taking a fraction, we're remapping it to the same thing. So you take this, and then you divide it by some number. So let's say 5, and now it should be animating. And even cooler, the bigger the denominator, so 50, the slower this transition effect. So again, we do this whole thing, we filter it through like an emission strength or whatever you want to do with it, and now you have something like this. Or you could do that transparency idea that I was talking about. Let's get rid of all this emission. This transparency idea, where now on different frames, different parts of the mesh, etc. are visible, but whatever. What you do with this isn't really the point. The method is what's cool about it. So again, edge split is going to isolate every single face into its own UV island, assuming they're not coplanar, random per island, and then a bit of math. Now, don't forget, by the way, you don't necessarily have to set this to 0. This is just if you want every face to be a individual island. You could totally, set this to 25 or whatever, and then it's going to do it in groups that are close to coplanar. But that's the essence of it. So different method from the ducky method, but I like it. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. We've made it to the end. What is this on the right? Is it a list of days left in May? Impossible, because there's like 700 or so names on this list. No, it's a list of patrons, and you can be on there too at the end of every tutorial. How? You click the link in the description. Why? Because you get blend files. For example, you get this blend file, anything I've made over the last 2 years, the Magnemite tutorial from 2 days ago, whatever. Anything I've made, it's on Patreon, generally. Additionally, exclusive tutorials I post every once in a while that are on either CG Matter or Default Cube. Discord access to the Patreon only part of the server. Early access to tutorials. This was uploaded early. You get all these things. How? Link in the description. So if you are interested in that, do it. If you're not, you have already clicked away, and therefore you are not interested. Thanks for watching my edge split tutorial. See ya.